Hey, this is Swift here again. Today we're going to continue learning about the assembly options, and what we're going to do is build this car. We've got a thick wheel part here, a thin wheel part, an axle, and then the car body. And what we will do is we'll put all of those into an assembly, and then not only will we put them together, but we will also learn how to use the mate features, and that's really making the parts stick together and actually revolve around the axle. So getting started, we need to make a new assembly, create assembly. Every time you make an assembly, it says, hey, what do you want to put in there? So we'll use the insert button. And let's start off. We're going to obviously insert the car body, and we'll just throw that down right here. We'll install a thick wheel, we'll put in a thin wheel, and then we'll also put in an axle. And we actually need two of those axles, so let's bring two of those in. We do need another thick wheel and thin wheel, but we'll add those a little bit later. Now that we've brought them in, we can say we're okay. We'll hit the green saying good, we've got what we need in here. Alright, now the first thing we want to do is, you can see they're all in really weird places, and that's fine. What we're going to do is we're going to start using these mate features. And the mates are kind of like ways to have your parts stick together, and they can actually interact in different type of movements. So there's a fasten mate, which is just sticking something together. You have the revolve mate, and that allows something to rotate. You have the slider mate, as it says, you can slide it. There's a planar mate, so that might be two flat surfaces that might interact. We also have a cylindrical mate, so that might go up and down while also revolving. There's a pin mate, so you might have a slot, and then there's a parallel mate and then a ball mate. Today we're just going to use the revolve mate and the fasten mate. So when you click on these mate features, it's going to ask you what parts do you want to mate and exactly where do you want to mate them and make them connect. So we're going to, the first thing we'll do is we'll mate the axle into the wheel. So we're going to click here at the very end of the axle. We're going to zoom in, click that. That's going to be the first part that we're going to mate. It says mate connector part 1 of 2. And then we're going to zoom out, and then now we're going to revolve around, and now we're going to mate it here inside this wheel. And you can kind of click on that surface or even get more exact, a little deeper inside the wheel. If I do that and we say OK, you can see if I zoom out and rotate, that it mated it, but you can see that it mated it in the wrong direction. So what we can do is we can actually come back here to our fasten, edit that, and then now we're going to change these arrows. And that arrow lets you kind of pick the direction that you want it mated. Now that we have it mated in the right direction, you can see that we've got the axle sticking out of the hole like it should. Alright, now our next part, what we're going to do is, the next mate feature we're going to use is we're going to use the revolve mate, and that's going to actually make it start to spin. So I'm going to click on the revolve mate, and it's going to say where do you want to revolve, and what we'll do is we're going to pick right here. We're going to revolve it on that face of that part of the wheel, and then now we're going to match it up to the body where we want that to revolve. And so I'm going to click here, zoom in, kind of click on that circle, and in this area is going to be the other mate. And so now that I've done that, I can click OK, and it moved the axle and it moved the wheel into the car body. You can see that the axle is now sticking out the other side. And now what I can do is I can actually right click on this revolve, and I can actually animate that. And if I press play, you can see that it's revolving. So it's rotating like it would in real life. You can change the number of steps. If I make this 20, it should go a little faster. You can, animate that however you want. So now that we got the axle fastened, we're revolving it in the axle. Now what we'll need to do is let's insert another thick wheel for the back. We'll put it right here and say OK. And then we're going to now fasten that to the other side of the axle. So I'm going to fasten. And what do we want to fasten? we want to fasten that part of the wheel right there. We want to fasten it right around the end of the axle here. And if we say OK, that worked pretty well, but there again, I think we need to flip that fasten. So I'm going to edit the fasten, and we're going to change the arrows on that. Click OK, and now you can see that it's in there and stuck onto that axle. And now again, I can go back to Revolve, animate it, and if I press play, both axles are now fastened, or both wheels are fastened to that axle, and it's rotating like it should and would in real life. All right, so now we got the rear wheels done. We're going to go around, do the same thing for the front. First thing we need to do is fasten the end of the axle here into the wheel here. And again, we can zoom out. We can see, oh, hey, that's not the right direction. We'll click on the arrow, make that the right direction. Looks pretty good there. Next step, after we fasten that, we need to go and get our revolve. We're going to revolve the face of this wheel. So zoom in, click on there. That face of that wheel is going to revolve around the axle hole in the car. So zoom in up here, get here on the axle hole, click. We can animate that through this, double check it. Looks pretty good. And we should say OK. And we've got our axle moving. Our axle is attached to the wheel is revolving around that axle hole, and now our last step would be to bring that other wheel in. Grab another thin wheel, place it right here. We need to now fasten that wheel just like we would in real life. We're going to fasten this part of the wheel on the very end of the axle, flip it, and say OK. And again, we can go back and animate that revolve too. Now you can see both wheels are rotating like they would in real life. If you want to, you could go through and we can name that. We could say front wheel rotation. We could rename revolve 2, rename that rear wheel rotation. So now we've got that all done. You've just learned how to use the assembly